Morning, everybody. How's everybody doing this morning? My name is Jarrell Carson, and today we will be going over the Windows boot process. Now, today we're going to basically just go over the 4 basic functions of the boot process, and then basically afterwards we're going to kind of just break down some of the excruciating detail on how each phase of the boot process works and how they're functionalized. And then just basically, I promise I'll keep it as simple and low-key as possible and try not to get everybody confused. And then afterward, we'll then put it all together and just kind of review some of just the key points that we went over, discussing some of the processes and the phases through the boot process. So other than that, if nobody got any questions or comments, then let's get started. So I'm going to start off by asking, does anybody know what the first phase of the Windows boot process is? Anybody got a guess?
Power up.
Power up? I mean, that's a good answer, but looking for that specific word. Does anybody know? Good. That's a good answer too. But more on the line, I was looking more for the startup BIOS process or the bootstrapping phase. Does anybody know the second part? No? Okay. We got boot manager and Windows bootloader. How about the third? We got kernel mode configuration, and then top it all off, we got user mode configuration. So basically the startup BIOS or the bootstrapping phase pretty much is whenever you turn on the computer, the first thing you'll see is when the BIOS is going to start doing its thing, and then basically you're going to have a diagnosis of everything that's running through the computer. So basically any hardware and anything that pulls up through the post, which is the power on self-test. And then afterward, the BIOS is basically displaying, like I said, some of the display on the screen. So some examples you might have is like the processor, floppy drive, the hard disk drive, optical drive, the memory RAM modules, the BIOS revision, date, graphical cards, I mean, all that good stuff. So basically anything that pulls up, it's just going to display it on the screen for you. And then practically, if something pulls up on the screen and you have like some kind of error message, then it will kind of show you what is going on. So like I said, you could have a graphic card not working, or one of your RAM modules is malfunctioning, or something along with that nature. So this is a video that just kind of sums it up, basically what it talks about the post and everything. So then we move on to the second phase, or the Windows Boot Manager. Now, can anybody tell me where the Boot Manager is located at? Anybody? Okay. Well, basically, the Windows Boot Manager and the configuration data required for the Windows Boot Manager is basically, located in the boot INI file, and it's primarily located in older versions of Windows as well. And then the boot manager also, like I said, can have both read-only and hidden features, which is located in the root directory of the partition. And then on the Windows computer, this partition is labeled as the system reserved and doesn't really have a drive letter located on it. So the only way to be able to pull it up is to kind of open up those hidden files that are located in the So, and then like I said, on most Windows computers, the partition, I mean, like I said, it can be located. You just got to right click, find it in the folder, open it up, and then you can basically do all the configurations on it. And then this is just basically a chart just showing like how the process goes when basically going up to the bootloader. So you have basically, like I said, the startup BIOS where it starts to turn on from the PC and then initializes the hardware. And then the BIOS pretty much called the code stored in the MBR at the first disk. And then afterward, once that is initiated, it loads the code into the boot sector of the active partition, which means the active partition then starts to load up through the boot sector, and then it runs the bootloader into its file system. So then, now here's another short clip that's kind of just summarizing what we went through the MBR and showing the active partitions and going into the bootloader, and then kind of just summed it all up with the active partition. Does anybody have any questions or concerns at this moment? I'm telling y'all, it's going to get juicy, I promise. It's going to get real good. Okay. So then the third phase that we go into is the kernel mode configuration. Now, since like I said, we're officially in the kernel mode, basically during this phase, the bootloader is just now completing the process and going through just trying to load up to the operating system. The Windows NT kernel, or the, sorry, I could pronounce this, but the NTOS kernel.exe file, it basically gets loaded into RAM. And then we basically talk more into HAL. Does anybody know what HAL stands for? The hardware, or HAL, or hardware abstraction layer, is basically a layer of programming that allows the computer to interact with the hardware pieces inside on the motherboard, allowing applications to also be extracted with performance of the hardware devices as soon as possible. And then, like I said, there are two phases that go along with this process. During the first phase, the internal memory will be created on each CPU and interact with the controller and be initiated, which allows the memory manager to initiate as well, along with the device drivers, the system drivers will also be recognized and be put into RAM as well. Then after the hardware, the boot sequences, and the system drivers are all loaded into RAM, then the kernel will activate the session manager subsystem, or the SMSS.exe file, which also initiates an environment variable, starts up Windows 32 subsystems, starts up the client server's runtime, and even begins loading up the Windows login manager as well. Now, the Win login is supposed to be responsible for handling, just interacting to the Windows system, along with turning on graphical identification, authentication, which is located during the process, which also allows you to log on through the Windows services automatically. Now, I gotta ask y'all, because I know most of y'all are thinking this right now, it's going through your head. I gotta ask. Like, when y'all were thinking of kernel mode, were y'all thinking of this? I mean, I don't know, I feel like most of y'all were going through that in your process. And I also want to give it up to my amazing assistant here, giving out everybody this delicious kernel. So everybody start giving him a hand. Like, come on. Come on, give him a hand, guys, let's go. All right. So now, basically, we're gonna go into more into the how. We kind of already went through this process, but I wanted to show you this chart here of the how, or hardware abstraction layer, which kind of goes in a cycle, starting with allowing the application to extract as much performance out of the hardware devices as possible. Then once they do that, it enables the device driver to provide direct access to each hardware device so they can have their own purpose and independency. And then once you initialize both of those, they'll finally end up having the capability of software programs to communicate with hardware devices. So then here's the third phase on this clip, is kind of showing kernel mode configuration, showing the how, and then kind of locating the kernel files and all that good stuff. So here's just basically a picture of what it looks like when you load Windows up. And as you can see the loading cycle going through its process. So that means it's basically loading up everything through RAM and going through the process through kernel mode configuration, and finally having to be able to load up through Windows. Now this is just, like I said, a picture of Windows 8 or Windows 10 loading screen. Like they had one for Windows Vista, Windows 7, Windows Me. I mean, all those basic loading screens basically is showing through this process after you go through the kernel mode configuration process. And then once you finish kernel mode configuration, everything goes through RAM, everything having to finish the process of going through everything in that phase, then we officially go into user mode configuration. So in user mode configuration, the login user interface, or the login UI feature, and the credential provider collect the username and password, and then once that happens, it passes along the information securely through the LSA file authentication. Now, if a user supplies valid configuration and credential, then access will be granted by using either the default kernels, I believe that they pronounce it, authentication protocol, or the Windows NT LAN manager, or the NTLM. After that, Windows login will finally initialize the security settings, the authentication feature, while the plug and play initiates, as well as the auto load services and drivers. And after the user logins into Windows, then the control set references by the registry can be initiated as well. And going into this even further, we got also known as the last known good configuration, which is updated with the content and the current control set subkeys. By default, Windows login will start the user initiation or user init.exe file in the Windows Explorer shell, and user initiate start up other processes, including the root policy setting, which takes place when the user and computer take effect. Then we start going into startup program with the Windows Start login script and the startup program, and the services references in the registry subkeys and file subsystem folders. And here's just basically a chart just showing an example of like what some of these folders would look like once all that is configured and set up through user mode configuration. So you can see like this one here, it's kind of hard to decipher, but you got the H key underscore machine software, Microsoft Windows. You got this one as well. They're almost kind of like the same thing. The only difference is it's showing the different versions of that file and showing the other parts of the configurations in that folder. And then once you hear that sound, that lets you know that Windows is finished loading up, and then it's going to start loading into Windows unless you have a username and password credential that you can sign into. And this video is just practically showing that process. But once you finish loading Windows, then it'll log yourself in, and then you'll officially be in. And then you'll have the graphical user interface, or GUI. And then you have like the desktop set up, all the icons that are registered by default in Windows. And you can basically install any program if you're the administrator. Like as a standard user account, you will honestly not have those kind of configurations or types of authentication to do that. But as the administrator, you can practically do anything. So install programs, upload files, practically anything that you can think of that the administrator can do. So once that is initiated, then this video here, this last video I will show you a summary of everything that we went through with the login process, everything in user mode configuration. Does anybody have any questions or concerns on that phase of the Windows boot process? Alright, well, I thank y'all for watching, and I know it was kind of short, but like I said, there wasn't really a whole lot of information displaying on the Windows boot process, but I tried to extract as much information as I could along with the information that I had. But I do appreciate all y'all watching. I do appreciate Mr. Hamilton. I appreciate the class, and I appreciate our school. And I just want to keep continuing to learn and be able to extend on my experience here.